If you were a new expat to a foreign country and believed an active serial killer was stalking you, what would you do? Imagine you wake up one day and your spouse tells you you're moving to Romania. Personally, probably wouldn't be my first pick, but it is ranked one of the safest countries in Europe. The food's good, and his job's already hooked you up with an apartment in Bucharest city center. Sure, the walls are paper thin and literally everyone is snooping for that juicy neighbor goss at all hours of the day, but it could be way worse. There could be a public news alert about someone going around behaving women in their apartments. You might catch someone watching you through the window at night and following you during the day. And everyone you meet is treating reports of a serial killer called the Spider like a dinner party joke. Looks like it's up to us to keep ourselves out of his deadly web. I'm gonna break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Spider Watcher, Spider-Man in Watcher. Julia is a fish out of water in all the wrong ways. She's just given up her career as an actress back in the States to join her husband Francis in Bucharest. A terrible decision, as Francis is the grown-up version of one of those babies Sparta would have yeeted off the cliffs and returned to sender. He knows the local language fluently, but has left Julia with zero support structure or guidance to help navigate her new life here, and gaslights her at her every mention of the man stalking her. Her foreignness seems heightened from the moment she arrives, especially when people find out she doesn't know the language yet.
Dacă spun că ești foarte frumoasă.
What did he say?
He said he hates you.
Is this some sort of Eastern European joke I'm too Western to understand? Maybe he's still about Euro trip. Their landlady lets them into an apartment decorated by Dolores Umbridge, where half the lights don't work and there are no curtains across any of the windows. I'm not shaming here, but maybe clapping cheeks in front of a giant open window is gonna draw some unwanted attention. But hey, if that's not a problem for you, jet lag hits Julia hard. When she can't sleep during a rainstorm, she starts peeping on the neighbors before she notices that one of them has beat her to it. It's not like we can blame him. The show you two exhibitionists put on would cost extra to rent on Skinamax. Julia eventually buys curtains, but god, make them a priority buy to muffle the weather. The rain sounds as loud as a freight train in here. No wonder she can't sleep. When Julia wakes up the next morning, Frances has already gone to work. She spends a few seconds putting away the all of 10 things she brought with her before she hears the neighbor next door take a tumble. Great, so not only did we give everyone a show last night, we also forced them to listen to a podcast of us banging. Fortunately, Julia seems into that. To be fair, so do all the neighbors. It may just be a cultural thing, but nobody tries to hide their snooping in this building. It takes one half tourist stroll to a cafe in Florist to realize Julia isn't what you might call a self-soother. She gets bored quickly and shows zero creativity when trying to entertain herself. Sure, she just arrived into a new country, but she's just arrived in a brand new country. I get the sense that Frances sort of sprung this move on her. She had no time to prep or plan for this trip, and that's fine, but this movie doesn't take place in 1976. It's present-day Bucharest. She has internet access and all the free time in the world. Romania partially contains the region of Europe that used to be called Transylvania, so at the very least, there's a Dracula tour somewhere that she could sign up for. Now would be a great time to point out the easiest way to prepare yourself for anything in an adoptive country. Print out a cheat sheet, a literal piece of paper with the names and numbers of important local things, like a pharmacy, your home country's consulate, and the nearest police station. Go one better and print out a street view map of your neighborhood. Why print? Because electronics are powered by spite, and they know exactly when you need them most. With your mini map in hand, walk that daily until you know it well. Not in case an axe murderer takes a shining to you, just in case your boredom turns into something unhealthy. Like it does for Julia, who immediately fixates on the weirdo watching her the night before. Almost like she knows the plot of this movie before it happens. Unable to sleep the next night, Julia looks up to see the peeping neighbor standing in the same spot by his window again. Bro, turn your lights off. Backlighting yourself only makes you more visible, like the saddest Batman at 3:32 a.m. every third Tuesday of the month. Unless the dramatic effect is part of your fetish, then by all means. To be fair, this building has 1,000 windows, 1,000 different channels he could choose. Assuming he picked ours to watch is a huge leap right now. But even if he is watching us, we are watching him too. Julia's throwing a lot of stones in this glass house. One woman's people watching is another man's marathon. Later, Julia arrives home to find her apartment door open and a strange man standing motionless in the dark.
Gata. S-a reparat și lumina.
What is this jump scare? Does your electrician charge extra for that? You're fixing a light, not all the lights. I bet this is how you get your rocks off, you sick. A note on the door, or even just leaving the door wide open with the lights on inside, might have neutralized the adrenaline now tearing its way through our colon. Look, I'm not ungrateful for the maintenance, but there are 1,000 better ways to do this, so someone's getting a flaming bag of their doorstep tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, information about Romania tenants law is scant online, so let me know in the comments if it's a normal thing over there for a landlord to jump scare their tenants, or if someone's pranking the American here. Frances works late again, and Julie is left to entertain herself. Instead of firing up the Xbox, she puts on her red dress, shuts off the lights, and poses for her new secret admirer. And here I thought you wanted less attention from him, not more. Look, I'm not saying she's gotta buy drapes and hide in her apartment like a mouse, just because some has boundary issues. But third time is the charm with this guy. Either he's staring at you or he isn't. And if he is, you want to know for sure. The first step is to test whether he's just a harmless sad boy or a dangerous incel. There are at least 2 ways to do this, but for the sake of a young American expat with limited resources and no friends, let's go with these 2. The first, but riskier, option is to take photographs or video. Every time Julia thinks she's being watched, she should have her iPhone in her hand, pointed where she's looking. We're not making 70s exploitation films here, so we're gonna try and be subtle about it. Take photos of the square below and the buildings to either side of his before turning the camera on him. If he steps out of the way once he sees the phone in your hand, test it again a few hours later, or the next night. 1 time stepping away is convenient. Twice is intentional. We'll know he's looking at us. She could also invest in a small camera for the corner of her bedroom, pointed at him, so that when she steps to the window in the living room, his eye doesn't immediately notice that he's being recorded. Would this be admissible as evidence? Probably not, but at least you'll have a photograph of him long before he escalates to stalking you through the streets of a city you don't know. The second, less risky option for testing him is to buy those curtains. Yeah, I know what I said. You shouldn't have to do that, but we do live in a world with people, and you either gotta stay out of their sights or be able to fight back. Now, we are buying drapes for a reason. Experimentation. Remove the temptation and see how he responds. Either he's gonna find something else to look at, in which case he's probably just your run-of-the-mill, or he's going to escalate. If he does the second, removing his ability to track your movements within your own apartment and clock your patterns is going to be an obvious first step in your scheme to defeat him. Frances arrives to take Julia to dinner, and along the way, they come across the world's quietest crime scene. A dead body and some dude are being loaded into an ambulance. No offense to this guy, but doesn't he look exactly like a clown without the face makeup? Or is that just me? The next day, Julia is doom surfing through Romanian TV channels she can't understand until she finds coverage of the crime. She asks Francis to translate the story for her. He says the sad clown guy found a woman's body in her apartment. The story keeps going, but Francis won't translate the rest for her, leaving her in the dark. Unnerved, Julia tells Francis that she thinks the man across the street's been watching her. He asks which window, and she points it out to him, but it's broad daylight and there's nothing to see. They play it off in the moment, but she should bring him back to that window at night to look for himself. The problem with stalking situations is that staring at people isn't illegal. Most of the time, it's difficult to prove that a crime has even been committed until it's too late. So, involve people you trust as eyewitnesses. This is where photos or videos would come in handy, but there's still a simple way to catch the watcher in the act. Wait until nightfall. Have Francis Frances stand in the kitchen or pretend to look for something in the bedroom wardrobe and wait for her signal while she sits on the couch in the dark pretending to watch TV. Once she sees the watcher in his usual spot, call out to Frances to look. Since it seems to be this guy's pre-bedtime ritual, Frances shouldn't have to wait long for the proof he needs that Julia is right. Unfortunately, Julia learns almost immediately that Frances probably isn't going to be as much help as she was hoping. At dinner with his co-workers, Julia finds out the rest of that news story he wouldn't translate. There's a serial killer called the Spider working in Bucharest. He sneaks into women's apartments, leers over them in their sleep, shoves a pillowcase over their heads, and slits their throats. He's been escalating for months. What started as a shallow cut to the neck has grown to near decapitation, slicing so deeply through their throats he nearly severs the spine. He's killed 4 victims so far, and you're only now hearing about this. Did you read anything about Bucharest before coming here? If all the local news is in Romanian, and we forgot that Google Chrome has a built-in translator, I can almost buy Julia not knowing. But Frances is a what the bro, I'd bet actual money this isn't the first time your coworkers have brought this up. I bet you knew before you moved her halfway around the world, you twisted piece of. As you can imagine, Julia does not take this news well, and the internet is there for her, ready to fuel her every nightmare with blurred victim interviews and case details.
I think he was watching me before. Someone was always behind me, even when I was alone.
So you're not going to go into sketchy places like empty English language theaters you know do midnight screenings of, right, Julia? Somewhere where a faceless dude could get away with murder? Only a few seconds later, she feels someone sit down right behind her. She glances back at his Timberland boots before he sits forward and scares her out of her seat. Look at his face, Julia. Do you want to be scared of work boots for the rest of your life? If I were this scared, I'd walk outside the theater and dip to the side out of sight to see if he actually follows me. Like I said in my movie sins, your heroes will get lost. If he loses sight of her, unless he's planted a tracking device on her, he won't be able to keep following. Hide, pull a Denzel equalizer move, and record crystal clear video so you know exactly what he looks like moving forward. She ducks into a local grocery store, only to see what looks like the same man in the same boots shopping nearby. How did he find her here? Dude's practically stepping on the back of her shoes. She walks out of his sight, but when she turns, he's there again. This would be a great time to pretend to take a call on your phone and snap a few photos of the guy in living color. Better yet, take a photo of him behind these bananas very openly, then tell the fake person on the phone that you sent them that picture. Why? Because most creeps, traffickers, and killers operate in the shadows. The last thing a guy like this wants is to worry that someone will go through your phone. Find a photo of him and connect him to something that happened to you. We're still in the testing phase of this threat, gathering intel, and this is the perfect, very public place to do it. There's 2 other simple ways to test if he's following us. The first is the old car trick. Pick an aisle and take 4 right turns around it. Circle the block, so to speak. If he's still behind you when you take that 4th turn, there's a good chance you've got yourself a stalker. The second option is a bit bolder. Wait until he starts walking, then walk directly toward and past him. Make eye contact as you do. No smiles, no frowns, just soaking in all that facial recognition for later. The issue here is that she only saw his shoes in the theater. If she'd taken one hard look at his face, she'd know within 90% certainty that he's following her. Why? Because she entered and exited a movie halfway through it. Who does that? The chance of 2 people entering the same movie at the same time and bailing before it's finished at the same time and ending up at the same supermarket a few minutes later is either the start to an epic 90s rom-com or you're I'm gonna go with the latter. There's only one door back here, Julia. He knows where you're hiding. To be fair, it's better than being cornered in the adult diaper section, but just barely. Entering an empty, restricted section is a huge gamble without knowing for certain that someone else is there or that there's an exit. She only gets lucky on both counts. In the real world, your safest bet would be to walk to the nearest aisle with another person in it, walk up to the front counter and pay for those pickles like the still breathing spaz you are. Julia tries to tell Frances that she was followed.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm pretty far from Okay, a known serial killer is loose in the city, targeting women who look exactly like me. And now I'm clearly being stalked. Bro, she doesn't just need to vent. She needs you in her corner. You guys need plans, solutions, actions. I do not. He does the most tone-deaf thing you can possibly imagine.
If you're a big, strong man, I protect you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Francis, you aren't that guy. In newsflash, you're gone for the vast majority of the day. Even if he snuck in like Alex from Tao, you would never see him coming. It'd be a pillow over your face, a few seconds of struggle, and off into oblivion, you and your girlfriend go. But hey, at least they finally got some curtains. Too bad she hasn't bothered to check if the watcher was still looking. Either way, if those curtains were up earlier today, then today's public stalking is a good indicator he's escalated things now that she's canceled his trial OnlyFans subscription. Francis takes Julia back to the supermarket and asks to see security cam footage from her visit.
He's staring right at me.
Or he's staring at the woman who's staring at him.
Dumb. Did you not hear what your wife said? He went into her empty movie theater, sat down right behind her, then immediately followed her into the supermarket along with her path inside of it. Bucharest's Jack the Ripper is currently O.J. Simpsoning chicks in the AO. What the wrong with you? I mean, standing on a broken jar of pickles isn't exactly hard evidence, but does this seem like normal sad boy you, Franny? Look, I'm not asking for a true crime Netflix special here, but how about we spice up this amateur investigation with a few more details, Julia? Like the odd timing of your exit from the movie and his arrival in the supermarket. Go home, turn off the lights, and point out the weirdo in the window. If Francis still doesn't believe you, then, as we've already discussed, it's time to start recording everything you do. Francis pieces out of their life together faster than a prom date on Sunday morning, working longer and longer hours away from home. You can tell Francis really cares about his wife. Isolated and anxious, Julia befriends her neighbor Irina, a ballerina turned exotic dancer who has a very sweet, aggressive ex. And Chekhov's gun stashed in her coffee table. Drunk Julia makes drunk Julia choices. She returns to her apartment and... Julia, don't do it. Don't. God, Julia. Ugh, remember your training. Where's your camera set up so you can capture this live? Where is a second person standing at a site to confirm what you've seen? You've confirmed he's spying on you, but like Bill Murray once said, no one is going to believe you. How hard is it to buy a gun in Bucharest? Because I'd be felony carrying some heat after that neighborly wave. I'd offer to buy that neighbor chick's revolver offer. Julie is like Jake Jordals in the Molotov cocktail department. She's created a very different problem for herself now. Research from the University of California suggests that most stalkers suffer from both personality disorders and mental illnesses, and that stalkers who target strangers are more likely to be psychotic. Many believe that they share a stronger connection with their victim than they actually do. Basically, she has just confirmed an intimacy between them that he can use as an excuse in his twisted mind to justify whatever he does to her. This isn't her fault, but now he's going to make it her problem. Okay, Julia, now shut the curtains. Shut them. This definitely is not helping. Francis comes home to find her chain smoking in bed. She tells him the guy waved, but when he goes to look, the watcher's apartment is dark. Francis flips him off, and Julia calls the cops, but evidence is circumstantial at best. As an American, the most shocking thing is that a cop offers to take her over to confront the man and confirm whether he's the guy from the supermarket or not. She turns him down, so Francis goes instead. When he returns, Francis tells her what she thinks she's experiencing is purely coincidental, and that when you live in the same neighborhood, you're bound to run into the same people. Julia reacts to that about as well as you'd expect.
Want me to stop being rational, to just jump to the craziest conclusion like you.
Dude, you work in marketing, you lie for a living, and you can't phrase this better? Whether that gargoyle up there is an actual threat or not, at minimum, validating your spouse's concerns will keep her from panicking and isolating herself from you. Francis is is like a player looking at the wrong screen in Mario Kart, bashing into walls and throwing himself off cliffs he can't even see. He's asking all the wrong questions and just assuming she's paranoid, which just freaks her out more and makes her panic. At every turn, he tries to talk down to her, completely ignoring that she's stressed and super alone in a foreign country. Again, ignoring the serial killer and assuming the creeper is not a threat. Her loneliness and depression is still a problem you guys need to work through.
Believe me!
This is just a bad night, Jules.
Talking at her is only gonna drive her away, and you're gonna end up with PTSD if and when that guy chops her head off. Julia may not be a self-soother, but Francis knew that before he married her. There are so many simple ways to make her feel safer. Dude's just not trying at all. Cameras are cheap. Put a couple up. Help her find language classes, friend groups, or a therapist rotation she can join immediately to give her some grounding in this foreign city where she knows exactly no one. Get a dog, and when you are home, let her see you peek through the curtains once in a while of your own free will so she thinks you're surveilling that too. Honestly, if the apartment allows it, getting a big dog or two is probably one of the best options. Will not only make her feel way better, but will also make it way more difficult for serial killers or stalkers, whose ideal target is alone, unaware, and can be subdued quietly.
What can I do to help?
Nothing.
Instead, you shot her trust in like 10 minutes. Now believing she's completely on her own, Julia enters her atomic blonde audition phase and stalks the watcher through Bucharest. Not the worst idea if, say, you take precautions, like bringing a gun. She's definitely not subtle about it. Please God, don't tell me you're going to follow him down that dark tunnel. Don't go into that obvious murder dungeon. Have you seen Hostel? Let's just hope they use good drugs to knock you out before they take your kidneys. Turns out it's an underground club. Who knew an Eastern European speakeasy with would be the best case scenario here? Maybe it's a Mr. Miyagi mind game. To defeat the you must become the Sure, let's just corner ourselves in a dark basement with the guy that we think is a serial killer. That's A5 Wagyu prime thinking right there. Julia ducks out of sight and runs into Irina.
Julia?
Because apparently, Bucharest is the size of a rural town's high school. She comes clean to Irina about the entire stalker situation. Irina consoles her that it might be better to live with the uncertainty than end up strangled with the words, "I told you so" on her lips. You're telling me those are our options? Both sound less than ideal. And with Julia moonlighting as Batman if he were poor, the latter is definitely becoming more plausible by the day. Later at home, Julia falls asleep and wakes up to discover that one of the pillowcases is missing from her bed. Here's a third option Irina missed. She can just suffer hyper-realistic nightmares for the rest of her life. Now awake, Julia hears something coming from Irina's apartment. It sounds like a scream. The landlady opens the door, but the apartment seems empty until they find a cat has knocked over a lamp. Sure, because house cats scream like women being murdered. Julia notices the closet door is ajar, but is too embarrassed to investigate. You've come this far, Julia. Throw that door wide open. This entire scenario is a shoot no matter which way she plays it. She makes a scene, the neighbors get to dismiss her as hysterical. She doesn't do anything. And 2 weeks from now, the stench of rotting flesh finally starts an investigation, long after you're dead next door. If it were me, and I were standing in this apartment, I'd call out loudly for Irina and make a show of opening the bathroom and closet doors just to be safe. I already look unhinged. I am absolutely making the most of it. But honestly, the better call would be to not enter the apartment at all. call. Dial 112, the emergency number for EU countries, and report a scream and a crash from my neighbor's apartment. At least 42% of all calls made to 112 in Romania are in a different language, so it wouldn't take long to get an English speaker on the phone. Helping Irina is a noble goal, but without all that proof we should have been accumulating from the start, it's going to be too easy to dismiss our heightened emotional state as just that. The next day, Irina still hasn't returned home, and Julia finds her quote-unquote sweet ex banging on Irina's door.
Are you looking for Irina?
Sure, because when Julia does it, the whole building comes running. Julia dials Irina's number, and they hear it go off inside. Just as the guy's about to leave, Julia asks for his help.
You want me to knock on his door and get the guy to come out?
Oh yeah, please help me announce myself to the Watcher as a threat. This guy got Irina her gun. I try to buy one off him for myself. The ex bangs on the door, but when no one answers, Julia knocks herself. A disoriented old man emerges, and she darts away, coming face to face with her stalker just down the hall. Well, this is awkward. A few hours later, the cop from earlier arrives at Julia's door.
Julia, this is Daniel Weber. He lives in the...
And he's brought her #1 troll along with him. Ironically, the best thing Julia's done here is create a public conflict between her and this weirdo that's now been documented by multiple people and the police. That way, this guy will be the first suspect if Julia ever turns up missing. The guys filed a complaint against her for harassment. The cop makes them shake and make up to sweep the whole thing under the rug, but it leaves Julia disgusted and shaken. After the cop and stalker leave, Francis shows Julia a newspaper article saying the spider's been arrested, the guy she saw in the ambulance a few days after they arrived. He'd already been to prison for assault. Francis. There's been zero mention of the spider any of his victims. That is not his MO. And this dude, what? Fixed his victim's plumbing before he killed her, then called the cops on himself, then stashed her clothes in his room. The spider didn't cause any of that same hassle for himself with his other victims. It just doesn't add up. Given that the killer just gained infamy in the news, it would be logical for him to attempt to throw the cops off by planting evidence on a local guy with a record. As a bonus embarrassment cherry on top, Francis then takes Julia to a work function so they can air their dirty laundry in public.
Francis said that you're having some trouble with one of your neighbors?
Gossiping about your wife? Really?
What did you just say? It's just a stupid work joke.
Uh-huh.
At least have the spider to keep me company.
1. You're giving your wife for moving all the way into a foreign country where she has nothing and knows nobody except for you to be by your side. And then you disparage her for being rightfully lonely and depressed with you being gone all day for work and is entirely reasonably afraid of an actual serial killer prowling the area. What the 2. That joke makes no sense because the spider was just supposedly caught according to your dumb so the spider wouldn't be keeping me company anymore. Yep, relationship concluded, pack your bags, grab a taxi to the airport, and GTFO. Unfortunately, Julia's night from has only just begun, but it shouldn't. Jules, your marriage just ended. Spring for a taxi. What I wouldn't do is go into an isolated underground subway. The spider has joined her on the train car. But there's no escaping this waking nightmare. The train's delayed, and the doors won't open. Suddenly, the spider sits down across from her.
Why are you following me?
I thought dreaming up a pretty girl who was looking back at you. But then you waved, and I thought that you were saying hello. I had hoped that after I involved the police, that would be the end of it. But I felt that what I really needed was an apology.
God, he is terrifying. Julia apologizes and escapes the train. Bags, taxi, airport. Scratch that. Taxi, airport. Going for the bag at night alone is dangerous. This dude is making himself known in a threatening way. He's salted the prey, so to speak. He knows you're going home to pack your bags. This is the night he'll strike. By going to the airport, you're not necessarily leaving because you probably can't without your passport, which is probably in the apartment, but at least you'll be safe and can can come back the next morning in broad daylight. At home, Julia starts packing, but she's interrupted by music coming from Irina's apartment. Again, Julia, after that train encounter, you didn't even bring a knife with you. You know this loud music is bait. You know it. I know it. The old deaf woman that can hear this 3 blocks away knows it. Not only is it bait, but it's cover for any noise you make while he's subduing you. Holy, do not enter Irina's apartment, for the love of God. Of course, she doesn't notice that the apartment door has closed behind her as she ventures towards Irina's bedroom. She literally walks in, avoiding checking any blind spots. And now it's too late. A plastic bag slides over Julia's head like a death hood before the spider knocks her out cold.
Or scream.
Julia awakens, enveloped in a deadly plastic smiley grocery bag. He tells her he was there in the closet that night when she caused a scene in the hallway. Yep, he takes off the bag and holds his knife to her throat. She hears Francis's footsteps. When he calls out to her, she tries to scream. With a knife to her throat, the better move here would have been to remain quiet and wait either for him to back up just enough that he can't slice and dice you immediately, or so you can knock that knife aside to call out. Julia crawls for Irina's coffee table for the gun stashed inside. She doesn't make it. Blood pools from her neck wound. You're gonna check her pulse, right? Make sure she's actually dead, because she's probably not fully bled out yet. No? Oh, okay, just checking. Across the courtyard, a little girl watches on. The spider washes his hands and prepares to leave. Next door, Francis tries dialing Julia's number, and he hears it ringing through the wall. What a stupid mistake. How can you expect to be a prolific serial killer if you don't even know how to put your victim's phone on silent mode? Pathetic. Francis steps out into the hall, only to see the spider coming out of Irina's apartment. Look at that! Julia didn't even have to say I told you so. He stomps forward to do what I can only imagine is barely anything, and a shot pierces the spider's shoulder from behind. He turns and takes a second shot to the stomach. Julia limps to the doorway, slicked in her own blood. Turns out, she might have given up that acting thing a bit too quickly. Guess Julia's just lucky he didn't go full Irina on her. Hard to come back from a full decap. Francis, you gonna call for an ambulance or nah? Maybe now? How about now? Snap out of it. And we cut to black. In the end, the spider goes defeated or undefeated, depending on the stage at which Julia calls in the heavy guns to deal with him. And by heavy guns, I mean cameras, a dog, and an actual gun. If Irina's ex can scrounge up another one for her. If any of those things had happened, her chances of keeping her stalker at bay until she had enough evidence to convince her husband to leave for good would have risen exponentially, instead of destroying their marriage for good. Julia survives this end scenario because that neck wound is superficial, and because the spider does shoddy work and doesn't know how to take a pulse. How she's painted in the foreign press later, and whether she gets to go home again, is another story. For these reasons, I think the Watcher from Watcher was beaten. Moral of the story: choose your partner carefully, and always watch your back. And get a dog, and a gun.